developing cloud-native applications, you need to move fast, not wrestle with choosing and deploying frameworks. You want to write useful code without infrastructure, cost, or scalability issues slowing you down. That's where Microsoft Azure Functions comes in. It accelerates serverless application development while making it easy to process and react to events. It's an event-driven, on-demand, serverless compute platform that scales automatically. You get a complete end-to-end development experience, from building and debugging locally on major platforms like Windows, macOS, and Linux, to deploying and monitoring in the cloud. Yet you only pay for what you use. Save coding time with triggers, which enable your serverless apps to respond to events. Really speed things up with bindings, which allow you to connect to other services instead of writing connectors yourself. Do you have complex orchestration problems that require preserving state? Solve them with the Durable Functions extension, which manages the state, checkpoint, and replays, allowing you to focus on your business logic. Azure Functions also lets you choose from a variety of programming languages and hosting options. Simply pick the best one for your scenarios and quickly adjust to meet business needs. Do more with less code while saving time and costs with Azure Functions.
Hey everybody, welcome back. My name is Jay Gordon and you are watching Azure FunBytes, where we get together and what do we do every week? Well, we have conversations with the people of Azure, or people who build with Azure, or people who are just having an amazing Azure experience and want to share with you all the different things, the tips, the tricks, and how you yourself can have an amazing Azure experience. So we just kind of set things up for today. And this week, we're going to be talking about Azure Functions, and specifically Azure Durable Functions. And to help me along the way, I've got a great guest who I'm going to bring in just a moment. And I just always want to remind you all that we have our chat and the comment section within Learn TV. So if you have questions or comments along the way, I really would love it if you go ahead and you share them with us. We just want to know that you're with us, you're here, and you're interested in what's going on today. So I'm going to bring in my guest. It is none other than the great Laurent Pignon. How are you, Laurent?
Hey, Jay, I'm very, very well. Thank you. And you?
I am doing well. I am really glad to see you. We used to be able to know that we're going to have some time together at least once a year, or maybe several times a year with some of the tours we did. But now, things are a little different. So this is going to have to do for today. And I think this is going to do great. And so I really can't wait to learn a lot about Azure Durable Functions and all the different ways that you have found some success with it. Because I know that ultimately that's the thing we really want to talk about. We want to talk about success and how our viewers can be successful with this software offering, or software deployment offering is the way I like to look at it. So Laurent, before we get too deep into anything, I just want to remind everybody, we always have a poll. We always like to ask you a question, you, our wonderful viewers. And we'd love to know if your organization has implemented serverless technology in your tech stack. So if there's somewhere along the way that you've all put together some really great things, just let us know. And also, if you want to talk about them specifically, put them in the chat. Talk to us about it. We really want to hear from you. And of course, like I said, if you have questions or comments, send them over. The other thing I want to remind you of is we have Microsoft Learn. Microsoft Learn is a really great way to start learning how to use a lot of the things that we talk about here. And so fundamentals is a really great way to start. And then today we've got some stuff that comes directly from our course and our module around creating serverless applications. So some of the things you'll see today and some of the things you'll hear today, they come and right from this, and you'll be able to take this as a free education to learn from. So that's really our getting started. And we've got some really great things to talk about. But before we really get started, first of all, Laurent, how have you been lately? How's time been treating you?
Well, it's still a weird time to be alive, I guess. Going from traveling the world 2 weeks a month at least, and raking, thousands and thousands of miles to a complete stop. But I'm happy to say that we've had actually a pretty good 2 years, and I would say we took the opportunity to pivot our team to offer even richer content online. And that has been quite an adventure for me. And especially the latest thing that I'm doing right now, which is Learn Live, which is directly related to Microsoft Learn that you were mentioning before. And some of the stuff I'm going to show today, I use that actually to build Learn Live, to create those episodes and all that. So I'm very much behind the scene for that. But at the same time, it's very fascinating to do that, and it's very rewarding as well to work with tons of people to make this happen. So that's been good. Yeah. On a personal note, last year I'm always telling people, people keep complaining about 2020, 2021, 2022. Actually, 2021 has been one of the best years of my life. I got married. My fiance, who before was always, thank you, was always back and forth between Switzerland and the Philippines, can now stay here, and we are finally together for good. And we even managed to do a little bit of traveling. We went to Iceland, we went to a few places, and riding the Harley a lot, which before I couldn't do so much because I was traveling so much. So it's been a good thing. So altogether, I'm not unhappy. I even managed to speak at 2 conferences in public, in person, this year, 2. That's like a little bit miserable, but those were really good, including NDC Oslo, where I actually gave a deep dive on durable function, which we are discussing today. So, yeah.
Spectacular. So I've heard about how you're doing and what you've been up to. But for those who may not be very familiar with what you do and what you've done and how you got here, I'd love to ask you, how did you get here, Laurent?
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a wild ride. I basically didn't start my career in a very conventional way, because I studied literature, Latin. I did 9 years of Latin in high school. And basically, I never thought I would be an engineer one day, but at some point, I really, really, really wanted to be a pilot, and somebody recommended me to follow an engineering class, engineering school, really, because it was a good way to prepare yourself to become a pilot. And I thought that was a good idea. And while I was studying, I really discovered that I love engineering. And so the pilot thing didn't pan out. I'm not going into the details, but essentially, I was quite happy on one hand, because I really discovered during engineering school that I love engineering. I love building stuff. And it's very creative. It appeals to my artistic nature, I would say, the one that I was nurturing before by writing poetry and all kinds of things. And then I pivoted that creativity into software, really. And, fast forward years later, I joined Microsoft 4.5 years ago. Before that, I had been an MVP, Microsoft MVP, and a Microsoft Regional Director. So those are 2 partner programs, people who are not paid by Microsoft, but who are partnering with Microsoft. And I was an MVP since 2007 and Regional Director since, I forget, 2015, I guess. So I was already working very close from Microsoft anyway. And so when I heard through one of our colleagues, you know him, Scott Kate, who's a good friend of mine. When I heard that there was a potential job for me there, I immediately went to interview, and things went well. I'm still there. In the course of the 4.5 years that I've been there, I've been through quite a lot of changes. Old Black Sabbath song, right? So I've been through changes, indeed. Yeah, look at that. And of course, the biggest change of all being that now we are really creating online content. But I'm still at heart a cloud advocate. Very happy to be an advocate, and very passionate about teaching. And I think this is really what has been accompanying me through my whole career is this desire. As soon as I learn something, I love to basically pass the learning to somebody else. And so before that, I was doing that as a hobby next to my main job, which was to build stuff. And now the cool thing is that when I build something, I'm paid to also pass the learning to somebody else, which is really awesome. One thing which has been interesting, and Jason Hand, who's a colleague of ours, right? You know Jason well.
Great buddy of mine.
Yeah. Jason and I were talking last year about that. The fact that we had to bring everything online very fast meant that suddenly we had to build a lot of infrastructure to support that, and a lot of automation, and that's going into what we want to talk about today. And so it was really awesome for him and for me that before, when we were advocates, we were building a lot of demos, stuff that doesn't necessarily do something, but that shows a purpose. But then suddenly we're actually building stuff which is used in production to build something, to build shows, to build pages, to build all kinds of things. And it's been good. I mean, that was my life before, and now it's my life again. And most of the code I write today is actually used in production to build shows like Learn Live, for example. And that has been actually pretty nice. So yeah, I'm not complaining. I think it's been I've been very lucky, very privileged as well. I'm aware. I never had to really interview much for a job in my life. Maybe only the first one. The rest has been really through knowing people, networking, and basically reputation. Of course, does a lot. So yeah, a lot of privilege, a lot of luck also, but in the end, it's been really cool being here, and I'm looking forward to the 40 next years or so.
Yeah, it's a great path you've had, going from the world of wanting to have people travel along with you, and you're just having them travel along with you in a different way, making a journey into what their technology skill set is. And so I love the term learning in public. And I think that maybe Kelsey Hightower, who's a great relations developer advocate at a different company, but he talks a lot about learning in public. And I really enjoy that concept of, you learn about something and then you bring it to the masses and ask them to kind of be part of that. So love that. Love hearing about your story. I want to talk a little bit about Azure Functions today, because I know that that's our big subject for today. And so I'm going to bring up this page, which is right here on the Microsoft Docs section.
Indeed.
You can go here to this particular link, CDAMS 3CH, and you can go run over there right now. The long and short of it is Azure Functions is a serverless solution. You're writing less code. You're not necessarily concerning yourself with the infrastructure associated with that. And for the most part, you're giving yourself lower cost methods of building infrastructure for the cloud by reducing how many things that you are manually building. And then in the long run, you're not having to configure monitoring on your own. You're not having to configure the logging. It's all done for you. The scale, another big part. And there's some really great scenarios, Laurent. We could talk about these really quick. One, you can build a web API. And so what do you think is a great example of that?
Yeah, I mean, the web API thing, my favorite part is that you can really, so I'm very much into static web apps at the moment. I think this is fabulous that you can really build stuff where you don't need a whole-blown web server, which is, heavy and expensive to maintain. And passing a lot of basically the server logic into Azure Functions, and then removing most of the logic from the client and building the client in whatever client technology you love, right? Can be JavaScript. I'm partial to Vue.js in JavaScript because it's lightweight and it's kind of a view model approach, which I knew very well from my days in WPF and in Silverlight. So that's cool. I build actually a lot of stuff with Vue. But also I do a lot of Blazor these days because I'm a .NET guy, and so Blazor is cool for .NET people like me. And I build a lot of things. But of course, when you have a pure client application, it's a little bit limited. You need to call something in the back end, right? Because otherwise it's poor. And of course, a very nice way to do that is to build a web API using Azure Functions. And then we have, of course, different ways to host that. But a great way is static web apps on Azure. If you deploy, you point static web apps to a repo where you have a front end built with client-side technology, and then a back end which is built using Azure Function. You have an automated CI/CD going on. It deploys everything, builds everything, and then you end up with a beautiful web page with a web API which is there. Now, obviously, technology is never black and white. And the conventional way of building web APIs, for example, with ASP.NET MVC, is still there. And sometimes it makes sense, right? I mean, sometimes having something which is maybe a little bit more stateful and maybe a little bit more, I know stateful and API don't go well together, but, let's face it, sometimes you have to be. Or just having this concept of controllers to build your APIs, that can be actually very powerful. But for many, many scenarios, a function-based web API, serverless web API is actually a great solution, and it's really way easier to maintain. It's also going to be a lot cheaper, right? I mean, if you go, from running a simple ASP.NET website, or like, for example, when I had my blog running on ASP.NET, my blog and my website, I would pay maybe something like $30 a month. Now, it's not huge, but it's still quite a lot for a private thing. And then after that, simply by putting it on static web apps with a few functions, I reduce the cost to maybe $2 or $3 a month, right? So divided by 10, it's not bad at all. So that's a great scenario, I think. I use Azure Functions for automation quite a lot. I am automating a lot of pipelines, and this is where I use Azure Functions the most, I would say. But of course, if you build application, if you build, for example, also a mobile application, using whatever technology you want on iOS, on Android, having a serverless backend, and then maybe also a serverless database, could be Azure Cosmos DB, like a small instance, or it could be something even smaller, maybe PostgreSQL on Azure, or MariaDB on Azure, or whatever you want, really, and having the function in between and doing all the interface there, all the APIs there. That's a great solution, really.
Wonderful. And so there are some other really great use cases. And we'll talk about what your use case was in just a minute, using durable functions, which is an extension of functions. But another thing that I really can appreciate is, one, you can process file uploads. So let's say there's a change in a blob storage container and you want something to happen on behalf of that, it will. You can build serverless workflows, and that's what we're talking about today. Respond to database changes, like changes within Cosmos DB. Best way to think about that is, let's say you're creating a ride-sharing app and you're storing locations, longitude and latitude from a certain area. You'll be able to store all that is unstructured data within, say, a Cosmos DB database, and then every single time there's an update to that database, you can do something. You can run some business logic, like send the ride location back to the application, send it to the end user so they know, oh, here's my ride, it's on the way. I really like this idea. We need to get rid of the dedicated cron server, Laurent. I think that's something that's really kind of thrown way too much additional infrastructure requirements in front of people, especially developers who want something to happen based on a time. So running scheduled tasks, I think is really great, because then we can have predefined time intervals. And then here's some other use cases: reliable messaging queue. So if you're using queue storage, service bus, if you're working with IoT streams, or you want to process real-time data and SignalR, that's something that Chris Norig and I are going to actually be talking about, I believe, next week. next week. So
Awesome. I love SignalR. It's one of my favorite services on Azure. I built some really cool stuff with SignalR and functions. Yeah.
Very cool. So what we're going to be talking about next is durable functions. And Laurent, I'd love to hear exactly what are durable functions and how they kind of differentiate from standard Azure functions.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So maybe before we go there, let's talk a little bit about the use case, right? So on my screen, I have a page which is the Microsoft Ignite November 2021 web page. And before that, we had Build in May, and then we had Ignite again in the spring, right, in March. And what happened to me is that in probably in February, I would say, so like a month before the event that started in March, my manager at the time came to me and said, hey, we need to build something like a prototype of showing how we could basically host videos on docs. And that was relatively new. So now almost a year later, well, actually, yeah, almost a year later, we know that we had a huge migration from Channel 9 to docs for videos. So now our website for docs is here, for videos is here, right? This is where we have all our videos. But essentially, a year ago, we had nothing yet. And so part of my assignment, if you want, was to build that and basically to bring quite a lot of videos on this website. And this website, to give you a little bit of a background, essentially, we build our docs on GitHub. So we have repos on GitHub where we have some Markdown and some YAML pages. And every time you commit something there is an automation happening which builds those pages that you see. So this is the HTML result of that. And so my boss was telling me, okay, so there is an API somewhere which is going to give you all the catalog of all the videos that you have during Ignite. And what I would like you to do is check this API from time to time and then check if there are some new videos which have been released and add them to the website. And his SLA, if you want, or his request to me was that, okay, when a video is released, if we can have it online 48 hours later, that would be great. So I started looking into that and started thinking, okay, how can I do that? And 48 hours was a very long time to me. So I would like to be much faster than that. So essentially what I built is a pipeline which is working on the recurrence. And so I say, all right, so every half an hour, because the average session length at Ignite is around half an hour. So every half an hour, I'm going to go and hit the API. I'm going to get the JSON. And then I'm going to, for every session which is there, I'm going to check some criteria to know if this session is ready. Has it already been played on the live stream? Is it available? Is there a thumbnail for it, etc., etc.? A few criteria like that. And then based on that, I went ahead and then I started generating some Markdown. So this is a Markdown that we see now on my screen. And this Markdown is generated automatically. And then after that, for example, here I'm into general. And if I go and check the key segments, for example, and here we have the Ignite opening. And all those pages are generated automatically. And in the backend, it's actually some Markdown which is generating those pages. And you see the video ready to play. So that's interesting. But the problem that I was hitting there is that I need to run this pipeline every half an hour. And at Ignite, we have something like 300 videos. So essentially, every time I need to process 300 items and potentially generate 300 pages and then commit them to GitHub. And so I built also an automation which is using the APIs, the GitHub APIs to go and commit automatically as well. So 300, it's a lot, right? And so when you run this in a sequence, it takes about 35 minutes to run the whole thing. And unfortunately, if I want to run that every half an hour, you see that there is a problem somewhere, right? It's going to take longer time than the timeout. Plus, also, there is a problem with Azure Functions. The standard Azure function is that an Azure function can run for 5 minutes, and then it's going to time out. Now, if you have a premium plan, you can extend that all the way up to half an hour. But at some point, the function cannot run. And also, I didn't want to take a premium plan for that. It sounded a little bit, silly. So instead, what I decided to do is use durable functions. And so essentially, durable functions allow you to bypass some of the limitations of normal functions. So what I thought we could do is maybe just build a quick durable function.
Sure. Before we do that, I just wanted to make sure. I know you're a .NET person, but I wanted to show everybody what languages are actually supported within durable functions. So we've got C#, which, right up your alley, JavaScript, Python, F#, PowerShell. These are all available for you to develop your functions with. Really, really important that accessibility to different people's skill sets is there.
Correct.
And I also just wanted to remind everybody, before Laurent starts showing us a little bit more about how to create this function, that we have a poll. And if you'd like to take the poll, you can head over to the Learn TV website, aka.ms/LearnTV, where we're asking, has your organization implemented serverless technology in your tech stack? So you developers, if you're watching right now, let us know, hit that poll. And also remember, we've got a spot for you to be able to ask questions, to leave comments. We've already seen there's some lively conversation already going out. Happy says, I'm loving it, and saying it's a fantastic session. And there are some questions about availability for progress isolated mode, which we can talk if we get some time about that and see if we can answer
I just want to say something to that, if I may. I want to just underline that I'm actually not an expert in durable functions by far. By all means, I'm really basically a builder of stuff, right? So I see a few questions. There are some questions that I know the answer of. For example, is .NET 6 supported? The answer is yes. There are some limitations that somebody else answered in the chat, which is great. But essentially, what I think we should do now with those fantastic questions is probably save them. I'm sure.
Absolutely.
And then we'll direct that to Jeff Holland, who is basically the master of functions at Microsoft. And then we'll find a way to answer that. Maybe we can do a page or something like that. Some of the questions, I actually don't know the answer. I'm very sorry about that. But the fact of the matter is, basically, I'm a builder. I'm building stuff, and I'm not an Azure Function expert. But maybe you can do another session at some point, with Jeff or with Anthony Chu, or basically a few people who are really amazing at those functions, or Chris Gillam also is the architect of durable functions, and they can go deeper. But here, I think I'd like to show, and also in addition to what you said about the languages, right? So C#, sure, .NET, right? Java, JavaScript, Python, etc. Also, the tooling is actually huge, right? So you can do and start functions directly in the command line. You do a func new, and then you build your function, and then you start it, func start. And me, I'm a dinosaur. I love Visual Studio. It's awesome. It has everything I need to do. It makes my coffee in the morning. I love it, right? Everything's integrated. But really, a lot of people are doing functions in VSCode. And that includes probably the function teams themselves, right? So VSCode is a great platform to build that. And VSCode, of course, is available on Windows, but it's also available on Mac and on Linux, which means that basically you can build your stuff, including, by the way, functions in .NET, because .NET now can go also on Linux, right? On different platforms. So this is also a great place. Now, personally, I like Visual Studio. I'm going to show it in Visual Studio. But again, everything I show you, you can do it in other platforms, right? So if you want to create a durable function, what you would do is create a new project, okay? Then you're going to create an Azure Functions application. And then after that, this is really a totally normal function application where nothing special is happening. So I'm going to enable that. Durable functions, J, for example, okay. And I'm going to create that. And then after that, like you always do with Azure Functions, you're going to select a trigger. So what Jay said before is absolutely correct. You need something to basically start the execution of your function. And very often it's an HTTP trigger, could be a queue trigger, something happens when there is a message, could be a blob trigger, something happens when a blob changes on the server, could be a recurrence, a timer trigger. This is what I use to build the pages that I mentioned before every half an hour. Or you have here durable function orchestration, and that's the one that we are going to choose here. By the way, you see that it says .NET 6 here. So yeah, sure. that works, right? Now I'm going to create here this function, okay? And if I bring this here and make that a little bit bigger, now we see that we have a few things that have been included, including here an extension. And so again, like the lady was saying in the video before, durable functions are an extension of functions. But the cool thing now is that basically when you create a new durable function in VSCode or in VS, you don't need to add the extension explicitly like we did in the beginning. Now it's just added automatically. And then after that, we see a few things. So here again, it is .NET. In JavaScript, in Java, it would look different, but with the same principle. The first thing that we have is a start method, a start function, if you will. You see that it is a function. We know this because it has a function name. And it uses a trigger, which is an HTTP trigger. Now here I could change the trigger to be whatever I want. This one is an absolutely normal function. It's just going to react to an event and then start the whole processing, the whole orchestration. Here in that case, I'm going to select get and post, okay? And then we also have a binding here. Bindings are just a way to get some information injected into the function. This binding here is an durable orchestration client. So basically, it's the orchestration starter, okay? Then after that, what we are going to say, all right, I'm going to start here the orchestration. And then very fast, this function is going to return. Why does this function return and it does not wait on the orchestration? It's because we don't want to pay twice. If this function was waiting, then you would have to pay for this function, and then you would have to pay for everything else that is happening in the orchestration. And of course, you don't want that. So this function is going to return. It's actually going to return an HTTP code 202, which means accepted. It doesn't say anything about the outcome, but it says, I'm good, and something is running. And then after that, we are going to go into this guy here, which is also a function. And this one is an orchestration trigger. So that's something that you cannot call yourself outside of the durable function framework if you want. But the starter, which is here, is able to actually call this trigger and to start the orchestration here. And now we will see some things very funny happening because it's going to create an output, which is a list of string. And then it's going here to call an activity, which is called function hello, which is, by the way, here, right? So it's calling function hello, and it's passing a parameter, which is Tokyo. And then immediately after, it's going to call here the same function, but this time with parameter Seattle, and then same function again, but this time with London. And so what's going to happen here is that when you go inside the function here, you're going to, because there is an await here, it's going to actually call this function hello, and it's going to wait for the result. And then when the result is done, it's going to go to the next one, and then it's going to execute, but this time with another parameter, and then it's going to return here, and then it's going to execute the third one. So that's all good, but the problem is that if we put a breakpoint here, and we try to see what's happening here, so let's actually start to debug. Let's try to debug that, and then we'll see how it works. So this is the function console. So here I'm running everything locally on my machine. Later, of course, we would deploy that to Azure. And here we have a URL. This is a get. So I'm just going to be very lazy. I'm going to take it, and then I'm just going to go and hit where do I have a web browser here? I'm just going to hit the web browser just to go and execute, okay? You see that it's, what did he say here? We have a bunch of stuff happening here. This is basically some history, which is coming here. And now basically what is really interesting to me is that my orchestrator started and I have a breakpoint. Okay, this is really what I wanted to see. So now I'm going to put a breakpoint also down there in the activity trigger. Okay.
Okay. Sure.
So now I'm going to advance. It's going to call this function hello. There is an await, so the function hello is going to be executed. Okay. And then the next step would be to go on line 22 here and execute the second call to the function. But actually something very funny is going to happen if I press F5 and continue, basically. You see I go back on line 18. I don't go to line 22 immediately. And then after that, I'm going to execute. This line here, we already executed that. So why is it back there? Well, you see what's happening if I step into is that it's actually not going into this function again. What it's going to do is step over it. It's going to fill the output with Tokyo. And then it's going to execute the second call to the function. I'm going to press F5. Now I'm inside the second call. This time the parameter is Cial. Then when I press F5, it's going to go back to the start. But this time, again, the two first calls have been executed. So now I have two outputs. And then if I run a third time, it's going to do the same thing. So what's going on? And this is really confusing when you start with durable functions, right? Well, essentially what's going on is that the orchestrator is a function, and the activity trigger, the activity here is a function as well. And we don't want you to pay twice. So when the orchestrator starts here an activity, the orchestrator is immediately going to go to sleep. And since you pay the functions by the time that you use them at the second, right? It means that the whole time that the orchestrator is sleeping, you're not going to pay for it. So then this activity is going to be executed. You're going to pay for that. But then as soon as it's done, the orchestrator is woken up, and then it's going to go here. It's going to see, oh, I already ran this function. Cool, I don't need to run it again. Actually, what happens in the background is that there is some serialization and deserialization of state, and the state is saved in a storage account on Azure. And then after that, it goes to the second call. And then the second call, have we executed that? Not yet. So now it's going to execute it. And again, there is this whole serialization and deserialization thing happening. So that's one pattern that we call here function chaining. Okay, function chaining means we do the first function, then we wait, then we have the second function, then we wait, then we have the third function. And this is a way that you can avoid the timeout that I mentioned before, because a normal function has a 5-minute timeout. So if you have a very long running task of, an hour or whatever, you can basically break it in multiple subtasks, and then you can run those subtasks one after the other, and basically it's going to run, but you don't have that 5 minutes timeout anymore. This time is 5 minutes times the number of instances that you want to run. So this is one of the patterns, function chaining, okay?
Sure.
There are other patterns that are interesting. And for example, there is this pattern here, which is very similar. But you see the big thing here is that instead of having a list of output, a list of string like before, now I have a list of task of string. So basically I have a task in .NET is something like a promise in JavaScript a little bit. It allows me to run some code in an asynchronous manner, okay? So here's the big difference is that when I call context.callActivityAsync with the activity function, I don't have an await here. So I'm not going to execute that task. I'm just going to take the task and save it in the list. And right now I'm not executing it. And then after that, I go to the next step, and I'm going to again get a task, this time with Cial as a parameter, and I'm going to save it in the list. And then same thing for the third time. And then at some point, I decide, okay, now I want to run all those tasks in parallel. And this is when I use when all here. Basically, what when all does, it says, I'm going to run everything, and then I'm going to wait until all of them are complete before I continue to the next line, okay? So this is a very, very asynchronous way of processing stuff. Now, the cool thing is that because I have 3 tasks here, it's going to actually give me 3 instances of this function here. okay? But if I had, 1,000 tasks, if I
Sure.
had millions of tasks, well, it would give me 1,000,000 instances. And again, same as before, you pay for what you consume. So basically, it's very fair. Now, in the case of my orchestration of my pages, I have about 300 videos. It means there are some pages supporting those videos, some summaries and stuff like that. It's about 400 pages that I need to build. And just like here, I'm going to call when all at some point, and then I have 400 instances of the functions running together. The orchestrator is happily waiting until it's complete, and then whoop, there is a fan in, and then you continue. And of course, you can combine all those patterns, fan in, fan out, function chaining. There are more patterns that I think there is a link somewhere which is showing all those patterns that you can have. You can also use that, for example, to monitor something. If you want to have a very long-running task, which is monitoring a process, for example, that can be interesting, etc., etc. And that's been really cool because it really frees the mind. It helps you to build stuff which is long-running, which is extremely parallel. But of course, because of the serialization, deserialization process, because of the complexity of keeping state and restoring state, there are some caveats that you need to do, and that's important. It's quite important actually to take a little bit of a deeper dive into durable functions. Durable functions are quite a lot more complex to understand than normal functions. Hopefully, the small summary I gave is kind of helping people to get started with it. But it's been pretty cool and pretty amazing, really.
Yeah, it looks great. So one of the questions I have specifically is your success with it. Have you seen like great success in it aside from just building out your pages from here? What do you think is the best success story you've had so far?
Yeah, I mean, the pages that I built were a really cool success story, to be honest, because within a couple of weeks, I was able to really, have that ramped up, and this was almost a one-man show. But something that I've been using durable function a lot for is also Learn Live, right? So Learn Live is a show that we have. It's also running on different platforms, Microsoft Developer YouTube, on Learn TV, on Twitch as well. And we have a show where we run, before November, we were running one show a week. And it was kind of difficult to scale up everything. And one of our goals was really to say, all right, now we want to produce more shows per week. And immediately after Microsoft Ignite in November, we went suddenly to 3 shows a week. So we went from 1 show a week to 3 shows a week. And a lot of the things that you do when you create these kind of shows, so those shows are essentially always the same structure, right? You have the video here. We have two presenters. In this case, those presenters are MVPs. And basically, they run through a Learn module. It's a 90-minute show, so it's quite a long show to produce. And there are a lot of things that are always the same. For example, here I have, I'm sure they don't mind that I show their name here. They are public persons anyway, Charlie and Konstantin Kostya, who were the speakers on this show. And so one of the things that I need is really collecting a lot of information. And I know that you need to do the same for AzureFunBytes, because you asked me some information and I was very slow in delivering it, and I'm so sorry about that. But essentially, that's one of the challenges that you face when you produce a show, is that I need to collect a lot of information from people, and people are slow, so you need to nag them. And then when you have the information, there is a lot of copy-paste happening, right? And so one thing I built with Azure Function and Durable Functions specifically is a way. You see, this is what I use to produce Learn Live, right? So it's a repo here. I have tons and tons of documents that I need. So if we take an example, one of the documents I need is, for example, an ICS file. This is a calendar blocker, okay? And those calendar blockers, we use them. If you go to our promotional page, for example, for one of the series that we have right now, which is the Azure Cosmos DB Certification Study Hall, And if you go to here, you have add to calendar. So I say, all right, I'm interested next week, 19th January, we have a show. If I click here, it's going to download the file, an ICS file. I can save it or I can open it. If I open it, it goes into my Outlook and it adds the date into my Outlook. Oops, I'm showing my emails here, which is not a great idea. All right.
No.
No big deal. It was very small. I don't have any secrets. But essentially, this ICS file is something that we need. And this ICS file uses information, like, for example, the abstract or the location or the title or the date of start and end, which are the same for tons of other documents. For example, I also have an invitation that I need to send to my presenters to invite them to the location, right? To invite them to the studio. So here I have a date and time. So this is the date and time of the show. Date and times are very confusing because we have time zones. So what did I do? I generate here a link to this wonderful website, which is helping me to know when the event is going to be in my time zone, all right? Etc., etc. So we have tons of documents that we generate. And again, the same thing. Every time I collect a piece of information, like, I don't know, the presenter's profile picture, then I save it in storage and I kick a whole lot of durable functions, really, which are generating those for me. But a lot of things are generated automatically. For example, this is a description that we page on the YouTube page. It is formatted in a specific way, but it is, again, the same information that we have everywhere. So why do we need to copy paste? No, we have some automation to do that. So this was really a great success for me because within weeks, I was able to, what would take probably an army of people to create all those documents, all those invitations and things. Using automation, I was able to create that basically on the press of a button. So that was really cool. It really allows us now to have a very good place to move on with additional shows. And now we have plenty of ideas. We want to produce shows in different languages as well, probably Spanish first, etc., etc. So it really allows us to experiment with different formats, different languages, different IDs. And this is all thanks to the automation. Nothing is lost. Everything is preserved. It's saved. And it really allows me to build stuff much faster. So that's a cool success story. Of course, it's a personal success story. But that said, I know for a fact that durable functions are also used in the industry at a large scale. And I'm sure that, again, right, if you talk to somebody from the functions team, Jeff Holland, Chris Gillum, Anthony Chu, and those people, they will have plenty of things to tell. This is a really, really good tool to have in your tool belt.
Great. So let's remind people that the most basic of durable function app will contain 3 functions.
Correct.
So those are the orchestrator function, which describes a workflow that orchestrates the other functions.
Yeah.
Then the activity function, which is called by an orchestrator function, performs the work, and then optionally it'll return a value. So if you want something to actually happen and you want to find out what you did, if you wanted to access another API and then have it return some information, that would be it. And then a client function, and that client function is a regular Azure function that starts an orchestrator function. So this if you take a look at some of the documentation that we have available, you can actually see that you can create an HTTP triggered function. So Laurent, we've got about 10 minutes and I'd love to show everybody real quickly, and I'll bring it up on my screen. First of all, the tooling around Visual Studio Code for all sorts of different Azure products is incredible. And Azure Functions, there's an extension and it's just as useful and helpful as all the other ones. And getting started with building Azure Functions, specifically a durable function, really starts with opening up the command palette, accessing create new project. And when we create our new project, come on, let's do it. When we create our new project, let's try this again. Okay, why aren't you? All right, so first place we need to do is we need to specify a folder to keep it in. And we'll just say ABC 123. Great. Just want to find a place. And then what that's going to do is let you select what language. And we mentioned all these languages before. I'm just going to use PowerShell. Then what we're going to do is select a template that we're going to be using. So what we're going to be doing here is using the Durable Functions orchestrator. We'll give it a name. Durable Function Orchestrator 1 is fine. And then we're going to, and then we're going to just open in our current window so that it'll bring up. And so on our palette, we're going to see here on the File Explorer, now we've got this this kind of scaffolding. It's a template on what we're going to be doing. And you can see we've got our function right here, the PowerShell file that we're going to be actually using. And it's not that.
Which, by the way, we can recognize pretty much the same code I had before in .NET, except this time it's in PowerShell, right? So running in exactly the same manner,
And it'll run just like any other one that you expect using the integrated console. And then when we want to actually create a function within this space, we can just go back into the command palette. So let's bring the command palette up and we'll click Create Function. And so now we can select the template and let's just pick the Durable Functions HTTP starter. We'll give it a function name, what our authorization level is, and I'll just use anonymous. And then you can see it's gone and it's actually built out our specific function that we needed. So we've got here's our HTTP function. Right here, we have some JSON, we have the PowerShell file. It all gets built for you right here. See, here's PS1, that Azure Functions file. It's going to be easier for you to do this by picking tooling that you may already understand or tooling that you prefer. And the fact is that these integrated IDEs that we have here, they're going to give us the options to build it quicker, easier, faster, without actually having to understand every single little piece of code required. And having things like a starter kit, if you will, based out of that template, it just makes life so much easier. So check out the documentation around the Azure Functions, specifically Durable Functions, and you'll be able to build your own. I'm going to put this right here. Laurent was nice enough to have with his Galasoft website. He's got some short links right here. You can go and check that out. It's also going to be in the show notes. But Laurent, we've been through a ton of stuff. And we've looked at some, examples. We've talked about some use cases, but I really have a super important question for you. This is tremendously important. What is the best music style, and why is it heavy metal?
I know, right? It's like, is that even a question? I mean, there is no question here. No, metal is fascinating. It's and nothing to do with functions here, but really, I fell into metal when I was 14. Probably when I was 12, to be honest. I remember the first time that a friend of mine in school introduced me to some metal. And so when I was 12, it was in 83, right? Now, I'm not sure exactly how old you are, but basically I'm
43.
Yeah, so let's put it this way. We have an age difference, you and me, right? And there are guys who are indeed, guys and gals, right, for that matter, who are half our age or even less than that, and who are into metal. And metal is like an amazing common denominator to a lot of people, basically. And I remember going to my first concert. Now you're going to laugh. I'm sure you're going to laugh. My first concert was Scorpions.
Hey, a lot of people, Winds of Change, love the Scorps.
Yeah, back then they were really good. And Joan Jett was opening. And oh my God, Joan Jett, right? She was amazing in her blue spandex. And I remember that as if it was yesterday, really. And I was 14. I was front row. I went like 2 hours or 5 hours in advance, probably. I was pressed against the barrier, and then I was rocking. And I saw some pictures of you doing the same, right? So basically, this is amazing, right? So yeah, metal is fantastic, and I know you and I we share a love for Lemmy, right, of Motorhead. I'm currently reading the biography of Ronnie James Dio, and basically the one who invented the horns, right? Pretty much. Well,
as he
actually,
called it, like he used to say, his grandmother gave
his
this, and she
grandma,
would
yeah.
call it the malak. If
Yeah.
I'm right, it's just like an Italian.
It's a blessing, really. It's a blessing. It's a warding, right? It's a way to ward from the devil. So basically, it's a protection, etc., etc. So a lot of stories that we have. But really, what's amazing is that I remember very well that when I was 15, 16, and I was listening to Maiden, and I was listening to Metallica, and when I was 16 is the year where all those amazing albums came out. And then later, when I was 20 something, Nirvana came, and all that, right? And I remember thinking to myself, wow, when I'm 50 now, right? When I'm 50, I'm going to be old as we cannot say that word here, but old, right?
Old as dirt.
And I'm wondering what I'm going to listen to, right? And I was seeing my parents listening to stuff that I didn't like, and I was thinking, oh my God, I love my parents, but musically speaking, we don't have really the same taste. And I'm amazed that 30 years later, 35 years later, no, I'm still listening to the same music. It's still here. It's you see tons of innovation around that. And no, this has been amazing. And I mean, I miss concerts. I had tons of concerts delayed and postponed, and now I think in June this year I'm going to have something like 7 concerts in June, because these are all the concerts that have been postponed. So I'm really rooting for June. And I'm going to see Metallica, Sabaton. I'm going to see Maiden again. I'm going to see tons of people, Judas Priest, I think. So I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah,
I loaded up on a bunch of stuff. I've gone to some shows already. I've got a bunch of music festivals, one in London this year, in a couple months. Really, really fun. I absolutely love going and seeing live music. So,
yeah.
Laurent, we've just about got to the end, and I wanted to remind everybody, we had a poll today. We asked, has your organization implemented serverless technology in your stack? Yes, no, or it's complicated. And 70% of you all said yes, which gives us a lot of hope that we can help you reduce the infrastructure that you need to manage and help you write more code. Laurent, I really appreciate you being here with me today. It was a lot of fun. I learned some stuff. I got to talk with you. I got to talk to the audience, as always. And I really appreciate it. So thank you so much, Laurent. And I can't wait to see what you're going to be up to next.
All right. Thank you so much for having me, Jay. I really appreciate the time.
Let's give everybody the big wave goodbye. We'll catch you next time. We've got another show next week. Make sure you check the archive and take a look at the show notes if you want any of the links. So until then, see you all soon. Thanks for watching Azure FunBytes.